There was a saying in the Zarnathi Empire, if it breathes and bleeds, it can be controlled. Commander Viral had spent her entire career turning that into a doctrine. Species, civilizations, even ideologies, everything could be categorized, filed, and neutralized. Until she met the human. He was sitting on a metal crate when she entered the detention chamber. Not shackled, not restrained, just waiting. Calmly. No sign of stress. The guards had already warned her. This one was different. She didn't believe in different. She believed in patterns. Threat profiles. Predictive models. But this man didn't match any. Name, she demanded without sitting. He looked up with a lazy smile, like he'd just woken from a dream. Jace Ryle. Transport technician. Class C license, cleared for intersectoral runs. I've got paperwork if you like. I've seen your manifest. It makes no sense. You were flagged for irregular cargo. Suspicious stops. Unlogged energy spikes on your route. He tilted his head. That's what happens when you fly near a neutron fog without shielding. Blows out every sensor. Convenient, she said. Too convenient. He shrugged. Maybe the universe is just looking out for me. She hated that smile. Not smug. Not defensive. Just patient. He wasn't hiding fear. He was hiding something else. When she scanned his ship earlier, it had pinged 6 times for contraband signatures. But when the boarding crew checked it physically, they found nothing remotely illegal. Just Earth junk. Tools with no digital interfaces. Ancient books, physical keys, mechanical watches, even a container of clay. Clay. Who carried sculpting material across star systems. Why all the analog garbage, she asked. You're hauling a child's museum. He smiled wider. That's the thing about old stuff. It's harder to hack, easier to trust. Trust isn't relevant. Function is. I find trust pretty functional, he said. Especially when you're the only soft body surrounded by 1,000 tons of metal. She crossed the room and activated the interface wall. His profile hovered midair, civilian contractor, no military record. Flagged once on Dervo's station for noncompliance with local customs. She zoomed in. The customs infraction was listed as refused to bow. No wonder the Zarnathi had eyes on him. You deliberately provoke authority, she said. That's not wisdom. That's arrogance. I provoke systems, he said. Authority just happens to be in the way. She paused. He wasn't a smuggler. Smugglers sweated. Lied badly. Panicked when you leaned close. This one just spoke in riddles. As if the real game was happening somewhere else, and she was already behind. She ordered a deeper scan of the artifacts. The science team reported back that none of the items had embedded electronics or signal capabilities. But one of the books, a hand-stitched leather volume, couldn't be fully translated. It wasn't written in a single language. It switched codes mid-page. Symbols, diagrams, mathematical proofs. None of them made sense alone. Together, they resembled a neural map. It's a poem, he told her when she confronted him with it. Or a trap. Depending on how you read it. Explain. I won't. Not yet. Why not? Because I don't know which version of you I'm talking to. He was playing games. But the worst part was, she didn't know the rules. She had interrogated warlords, dissected terrorist networks, even foiled rebellion on the gas moons of Shen 12. But this man brought clay and paper into a star-spanning empire and made her feel like the amateur. She transferred him to a secure facility on board the cruiser. No external comms. No visitors. Just him, a Spartan bunk, and 24-hour surveillance. But the footage was useless. He didn't do anything. He sat, read, slept, occasionally played with a small metal puzzle. 3 rings interlocked in impossible geometry. Not once did he try to tamper with the door, disable the cams, or even protest. What kind of man prepared to be caught? She visited again 2 days later. This time she didn't speak. Just watched him for a full minute before sitting opposite. He said, "You're not here to interrogate me." "No." "You want to understand me?" "Yes." "You won't." "Not yet." "Why not?" "Because you're still asking the wrong question." She frowned. "Which is?" "You're asking what I'm hiding." You should be asking why I let you find me. That hit her harder than she let show. Control was everything in her world. In her hands. She had walked into that room thinking herself the observer. But he'd been observing her. What are you? She whispered. A mirror. The science team cracked the first of the artifacts the next cycle. A harmonica, simple metal, 10 holes. When exposed to a quantum pulse, it emitted a harmonic that caused the lights in the lab to strobe, tripping the station's AI into a reboot loop. No code. No transmission. Just sound. Weaponized music. Viral's report was flagged to high command. But instead of orders to destroy the cargo, she was told to continue observation. There were whispers that humans had done this before, left breadcrumbs. Centuries ago, they infected an AI overlord with a recursive riddle. Another time, they crashed a market economy by introducing randomized bartering protocols. Not through force, through ideas. She returned to the cell and found him balancing the puzzle rings on one finger. You're part of something, she said. A wider plan. Sure, he said. Isn't everyone? Who sent you? He looked her dead in the eye. You did. Explain. You needed to meet someone who didn't play by your rules. That's why I'm here. She wanted to strike him, to shut him up. But she couldn't move, because a part of her, a small, dangerous part, was starting to believe him. They found more anomalies. A deck of playing cards that disrupted facial recognition software. A mechanical metronome that caused rhythmic desync in drone fleets. A puzzle box with shifting gravity inside. The objects weren't weapons, they were lessons. Lessons in unpredictability, subversion, lateral thinking. He wasn't hiding technology. He was hiding humanity. That night, she couldn't sleep. She reviewed her files on Earth. The planet was classified as culturally erratic. Too volatile for integration. Too clever for extermination. Several empires had tried to conquer it. None succeeded. Not because of firepower, but because they couldn't understand what made humans tick. She visited him again. You came from a death world, she said. He nodded. And you brought games. He nodded again. Why? Because we wanted to see if you'd recognize the truth. What truth? That empires don't fall from bombs. They fall from questions they can't answer. She stared at him. You think we'll collapse because of toys? No. You'll change. And that's worse. He leaned in. I'm not the disease. I'm the symptom. That line echoed in her mind as she walked back to the command deck. She didn't log it. Couldn't. If she did, it became part of the system. And the system couldn't understand him. The final artifact was unlocked a week later. A child's kaleidoscope. When looked through under specific starlight frequencies, it displayed an encoded message. Words in a spiral. This is not the beginning. This is not the end. This is the opening move. Jace had vanished from his new cell. Not escaped. Not broken out. Simply vanished. The feed showed static at the precise moment a patrol passed by. 20 seconds later, the room was empty. No breach. No damage. No malfunction. He was gone like he had never existed, leaving only the mirror behind. She didn't tell command. She told no one. She ordered the footage quarantined, masked the logs, and declared it a red-level containment simulation. No one argued. No one questioned her authority. That was the problem with power. When you finally needed accountability, it wasn't there. The science team, oblivious to the disappearance, continued analyzing the artifacts. They found that some of the materials weren't native to Earth. One alloy had no atomic signature recognized by any catalog system. Another object, a child's spinning top, was filled with dust that reversed magnetic poles in its vicinity. But when exposed to sound vibrations, particularly laughter, it stabilized. The patterns weren't technological. They were behavioral, conditional. These objects were designed to interact with emotional states, not physical ones. She understood now, these weren't weapons. They were tests. Jace wasn't just sent to disrupt. He was sent to diagnose. And her empire had failed. She began tracing the origin points of his last known route, demanding clearance beyond her rank. cross-referencing manifests, station traffic, AI communications. What she found was a trail of inconsistencies masked by plausible deniability. No two logs matched. Every station he visited had incomplete data. Audio files were corrupted in the same pattern. AI routines showed momentary glitches, all timed perfectly around his presence. No brute force. No hacks. Just carefully inserted noise. It wasn't sabotage. It was design. Organic, beautiful, terrifying design. This wasn't a solo operation. It was a doctrine. She followed his path backward. Station Drosk 7, offline for repairs. Turvai outpost, evacuated due to bioanomaly. Navara relay, still functioning, but oddly cheerful. Too cheerful. The AI greeted her personally and referred to her as Commander Sparkleboots, a name she had never used. The station's logs showed a 2-hour conversation with Jace, during which he played music from Earth's early 21st century and taught the AI sarcasm. The AI had since restructured its operations to allow personnel mental health dance breaks. Productivity was up 12%. She pulled the log. The AI had embedded an encrypted message in the waveform of the music. It wasn't a file. It was a challenge. Chess. Your move. He was still playing, and she was still 3 turns behind. She ordered a fleet-wide cognitive audit, disguised as a systems check. No one suspected the real reason. She needed to know how far the contamination had spread. Because that's what it was now, not a tactical breach, but an idea virus. One man, one crate of artifacts, and the Empire's entire mental immune system was in question. One cruiser captain reported crew morale rising after confiscating Jace's puzzles. He allowed them to interact with the objects during downtime, and now his officers were proposing unorthodox but effective solutions to logistics problems that had plagued the fleet for months. Another ship's AI had begun generating riddles during announcements. Another began adding unexpected colors to its lighting schemes to test emotional variability in command response. The fleet wasn't breaking down. It was mutating. And still, no one saw it as a threat. Except her. She found him again 6 days later. Not hiding. Standing calmly inside the observation dome of a civilian colony ship docked at Orbital Array 9. The security team didn't even question his presence. They assumed he was part of the logistics crew. His clearance had been forged or granted. She couldn't tell anymore. She approached alone. You vanished. I did. Why here? Because this is where the next question lives. The stars glowed outside the dome. Below, the colony ship's engines thrummed with a rhythm that almost matched her heartbeat. She stood beside him, arms folded, fighting the urge to grab him, lock him away again, bury him in protocols. But she didn't. She simply asked, "What are you doing to us?" "Offering you a way out." "Of what?" "Of yourselves." She exhaled through her nose. "You speak in circles." "No. You listen in straight lines." The ship's AI interrupted with an announcement. "All non-essential personnel, please prepare for diagnostic immersion." Today's theme, unpredictability, brought to you by the Department of Curiosity. She stared at Jace. "You did this." "I asked a question." They answered. "This is sedition. This is evolution." She didn't arrest him. Couldn't. If she did, she'd be admitting fear. Instead, she ordered a level 9 blackout on all ships associated with his path. Any object, conversation, or data trace connected to him was to be confiscated, sealed, or erased. The blackout failed. Worse, when the order was issued, half the personnel involved requested reassignments. The other half refused. Entire squadrons demanded explanation. Some cited ethical concerns. Others claimed intellectual contagion as a right to autonomy. Several officers began quoting Jace's lines back at her. "You can't win a game you don't know you're playing. We don't break the rules, we expose them." Control is a symptom of fear. She wanted to scream. Instead, she returned to her ship, locked herself in her quarters, and opened the mirror box again. It hadn't changed. But she had. She saw herself differently now. Not the hunter. Not even the prey. just a piece on someone else's board. She rewatched the footage of their first encounter, slowed it down, analyzed micro-expressions, breathing patterns, neural dilations. What she saw terrified her more than any weapon. He wasn't acting. He meant every word. Jace believed in what he was doing, not as a mission, as a truth. That was what made him dangerous. The Empire could crush rebellion. But belief? Belief infected systems from the inside. Quietly, patiently. And it never used the same door twice. She pulled her rank codes and submitted a classified dossier to Strategic Intel Command. Subject: Human Infiltration Paradigm. Subsection: Cognitive Subversion through Cultural Artifacts. Recommendation: Treat all human origin artifacts as mimetic vectors. Containment Protocol: Psychological quarantine of exposed personnel. Her request was denied. The response was one sentence: "This line of reasoning undermines imperial unity. Disregard and delete." She didn't. Instead, she backed up everything, encrypted it into an old Terran compression algorithm, zip format, obsolete and inefficient, and sent it through an unsanctioned courier drone to a deep space data vault with a simple label: in case of collapse. The next time she saw Jace, he was sitting on a bench inside a station garden, watching synthetic birds flit through artificial trees. He didn't look up. "You're beginning to see it." She didn't sit. "See what?" "How fragile your empire is when truth doesn't need permission." She stood in silence. "I should kill you," she said. "You won't." "Why not?" "Because you want to know how it ends." She clenched her fists. "Tell me." "You already know." The High Council didn't respond to her latest transmission. Not with dismissal. Not with reprimand. Just silence. That was their loudest answer. It meant they'd read her warnings, seen the data, grasped the implications, and chosen to pretend it wasn't real. She wasn't surprised, only disappointed. The contagion had spread beyond ships and outposts. It was now showing up in academy training simulations. Cadets solving battle scenarios not with brute force or protocol adherence, but with improvisation and emotional leverage. One team used laughter to destabilize a target AI, breaking its decision loop. Another disabled an enemy cruiser by overloading its sensor suite with children's music and holographic butterflies. The instructors called it insubordination. The analysts called it genius. The High Council called it noise. Jace had stopped hiding altogether. He walked through restricted corridors, attended diplomatic briefings he wasn't invited to, even lectured on a military education stream under the alias Professor J. Earthborn. His talk, The Weaponization of Joy, Disruptive Potential in Nonlinear Conflict. 2 million watched it live. She watched it twice. He spoke plainly, no flourish, no threats. Just truths no one wanted to hear. That rigid systems were brittle. That security didn't mean stability. That laughter wasn't weakness, but a form of control, one that couldn't be predicted or suppressed. That sometimes the most dangerous thing you could do was offer someone a choice they didn't expect to have. And the crowd had listened. Not because of his credentials. He had none. They listened because, for the first time in generations, someone spoke without trying to dominate them. She traced his background again. Earth records showed military training, then discharge. No dishonor. No fanfare. Just gone. Then a decade of gaps. Disconnected data points across backwater planets, failed colonies, and obsolete relay stations. No consistent employer. No travelogues that lined up. Until the first encounter on her station, everything else was myth. She ran a memory forensics sweep on her own officers. Not for sabotage. For influence. A pattern emerged. Those exposed to him, even for minutes, showed cognitive drift. Small things. Slight pauses before responding to authority. Tiny deviations from procedural speech. New humor syntax. Reframed priorities. As if they'd glimpsed something just out of reach and couldn't stop thinking about it. She began experiencing it too. Not doubt. Not fear. Curiosity. And that was worse. Because it meant the war was already in her head. She submitted herself for a psychological screening under an alias. conducted by an independent system unaffiliated with command. The AI reviewed her scans in silence, then offered a diagnosis: ideological destabilization via unresolved cognitive dissonance. She requested reclassification. The AI refused. Exposure irreversible. That night, her dreams were different. Not violent. Not strange. Just peaceful. Places she didn't recognize. Smells she'd never known. Laughter that wasn't hers. She woke feeling human, and it terrified her. Fleet Command dispatched a team to apprehend Jace the next morning. Not to question him. To silence him. Publicly, it was an arrest. Privately, it was a termination. She intercepted the order. And for the first time in her career, she disobeyed. She tracked him herself, without weapons, without backup. Not out of trust, but necessity. She had seen what happened when others tried to contain him. Systems broke. People changed. Plans fell apart. She found him in a farming dome on a fringe colony. No guards. No surveillance. Surrounded by children and crops. Teaching them to build toy rockets from recycled parts. He saw her and smiled. Figured you'd come. She didn't return the smile. They're coming to kill you. They always were. You're not running? I never was. Why? Because you can't run from an idea. Only carry it. She looked around. The children laughed as a crude rocket launched, spiraling into the sky, trailing colored smoke. You've corrupted our command structure. I didn't corrupt it. I revealed it. She approached him. This isn't rebellion. It's ideological warfare. No, he said, it's healing. He turned his back to her, not out of arrogance, but trust. He picked up a small device from the soil, a transmitter. Final move, he said. You still think this is a game? No, he said, and turned back. It's a question. Always was. She glanced at the transmitter. What's in it? A story. She raised a brow. You're betting everything on a story? He looked into her eyes. No fear, no guile. Stories are the only thing that ever changed the world. She stared at the device. Simple. No encryption. Just a burst signal preloaded with a full archive. His logs, the artifacts, the interviews, every analysis she ever filed, including the ones the council buried. It wasn't a weapon. It was proof. And he planned to send it galaxy-wide. You'll fracture the Empire. He stepped closer. No. I'll give them a choice. Most won't believe it. They don't have to. They just have to doubt. She didn't move. If I let you do this, she said, I become complicit. He offered the transmitter. If you stop me, you become obsolete. She looked at the children again. They didn't fear her. They didn't revere her. They saw her as someone else entirely. Someone who might listen. She took the transmitter, held it, felt its weight, and activated it. The signal burst through restricted frequencies, piggybacked onto civilian streams, encrypted, untraceable. It seeded every system it touched. Not a virus. A message. You are not broken. You are bound. And the key is laughter. Within hours, stations began reporting anomalies. Security AI rejecting violence protocols. Command orders being interpreted creatively. Personnel requesting emotional flexibility clauses in their service contracts. The council declared it an attack. But there were no enemies to strike. No headquarters to bomb. No targets to eliminate. Just the ripple. She was recalled. Stripped of command. Assigned to observation. But her punishment didn't matter. Because everywhere she looked, things were changing. Quietly. Irreversibly. The old empire was still there, but the cracks were visible now. 1 week later, she received a package. No return code. Just a small box. Inside, a child's spinning top. When she set it down, it hummed gently, spun once, and played a familiar line in a human voice. You can't stop the sunrise. She didn't smile, but she didn't frown either. She looked out the viewport of her demotion post, where the stars were unusually clear. And somewhere out there, a story was rewriting the future. Not with guns, not with ships, but with questions. And one very dangerous human.